The diesel exhaust hung thick in my driveway when those three black SUVs rolled up at 11 p.m. Engine brakes hissed like angry snakes as they stopped just outside my new electric gate. I stepped onto my porch, clutching my grandfather's old Army dog tag in my fist, a habit I picked up after my divorce last year. Karen from 2 houses down stood behind her fence with her 17-year-old daughter, both holding up phones like they were recording the next viral sensation. "Terrorist threats through electronic systems," Karen shouted toward her camera, her voice carrying that same shrill tone she used at neighborhood meetings. The lead agent walked up to my gate wearing full tactical gear. His name tag read, Coleman. Behind him, 2 more agents flanked my property line while a 4th stayed by the vehicles, radio crackling with dispatch codes. "Sir, we need to talk," Coleman said through the gate's intercom. His voice was all business, no warmth. I hit the button and watched my gate slide open with a quiet electric hum. 3 months of engineering work, all the proper permits, code compliance, everything by the book. Yet here I was, feeling like a criminal in my own driveway. "Evening, Agent Coleman," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What seems to be the problem?" He pulled out a tablet and scrolled through what looked like an official report. "We received a complaint about your gate system potentially interfering with emergency communications and blocking access for first responders." Karen had crept closer to the property line, still filming. Her daughter whispered something in her ear, and Karen's eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "Interference?" I asked. "This system was installed by certified technicians. I have all the documentation." "Sir," Coleman interrupted, "we also have reports that your electronic system is causing medical device malfunctions in the area, specifically pacemaker irregularities." That's when Karen stepped forward, pulling a medical alert bracelet from her purse and waving it dramatically. "My heart monitor has been going crazy ever since he installed that thing. I could die because of his negligence." I stared at her, then at the bracelet she'd never worn before tonight. Funny how medical emergencies only happened when there were federal agents present. "I'll need to inspect your system," Coleman said, not waiting for my response. "And will require a technical assessment. The cost for emergency federal evaluation is $15,000, payable up front." 15 grand? Just like that. My IT consulting contract with the county was already shaky after some budget cuts. This could finish me completely. "Agent Coleman," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "I'm happy to cooperate, but this system has been functioning perfectly for 3 months. No complaints until tonight." Karen's daughter had moved closer, her phone capturing every word. In the background, I could see lights coming on in neighboring houses. Tomorrow, this would be all over the local Facebook groups. IT guy terrorizes neighborhood with military technology. Contract canceled. Reputation destroyed. The funny thing about small towns, everyone knows your business before you do. And if you're watching ConflictStory, you know, it's never just a misunderstanding. Coleman activated something on his tablet, and I heard a strange electronic whine coming from Karen's direction. She immediately grabbed her chest and stumbled backward. "There," she gasped, pointing at my gate control box. "It's happening again. Call an ambulance." But I noticed something odd. The whining sound wasn't coming from my equipment at all. It was coming from somewhere behind her fence, near that new shed she'd built last month. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, sirens cutting through the night air like broken glass. Karen played her part perfectly, clutching her chest while the paramedics checked her vitals. Her daughter never stopped recording. "Ma'am, your heart rate is elevated, but we're not seeing any irregularities," the lead paramedic said, removing the EKG leads. "Your pacemaker readings are normal." Karen's face flushed red. "But it was malfunctioning. His gate system caused it." Agent Coleman had finished his preliminary inspection of my equipment while the medical drama played out. He walked back over, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Harrison, your system appears to be functioning within normal parameters," he said quietly. "However, we still need that technical assessment, federal protocol. $15,000 for a perfectly legal gate system." I thought about my grandfather, who'd served 3 tours and never backed down from a fight. The dog tag felt warm in my palm. "I understand, Agent Coleman, but I'd like to request that assessment include the entire area. If there's electromagnetic interference, it could be coming from anywhere in the neighborhood." Karen's head snapped toward me. For just a second, I saw something that looked like panic flash across her face. "That's ridiculous," she said, stepping closer. "We've lived here for 8 years. Nothing changed until he moved in." The paramedics were packing up their equipment when one of them, a young guy with kind eyes, walked over to me. "Sir, I don't know if this helps, but we've had 3 calls in this neighborhood over the past month, all pacemaker irregularities. None of them were near your house." Karen was busy arguing with Agent Coleman about jurisdiction and emergency protocols, but her daughter had heard every word. The girl looked confused, lowering her phone for the first time all night. "Mom," she said softly, "didn't Mrs. Patterson call about her pacemaker acting up 2 weeks ago? Near the park?" "That's different," Karen snapped. "That was environmental factors." But the damage was done. Agent Coleman had heard it too. He made a note on his tablet, then looked at me with what might have been professional respect. "Mr. Harrison, we'll conduct that area-wide assessment tomorrow morning. In the meantime, your gate system will remain operational, but we'll need you available for technical consultation." I nodded. "Of course, I'll be here." As the agents packed up their equipment, I noticed Karen arguing in hushed tones with her daughter by their car. The girl kept pointing toward the park, while Karen kept shaking her head and gesturing toward my house. The last SUV pulled away at 12:47 a.m. I stood in my driveway, holding my grandfather's dog tag, watching Karen storm back to her house. She slammed her front door so hard, it echoed through the neighborhood. But I couldn't shake what the paramedic had said. 3 calls, all pacemaker issues, none of them near my house. I walked to my back fence and looked toward the park. Karen's new shed sat right between my property and the public green space. A shed she'd built exactly 1 month ago, according to the work permit I'd seen posted on the community bulletin board. The same time the pacemaker problem started. Have you ever had that moment when puzzle pieces start clicking into place, but you're not sure you want to see the whole picture? I was about to find out just how deep Karen's game really went. The next morning arrived with the smell of fresh rain and the sound of work boots on wet gravel. Barney Kowalski stood at my gate at 7 a.m. sharp, toolbox in one hand, coffee in the other. 70 years old, Vietnam vet, and the best electrician in 3 counties. "Heard you had some excitement last night," he said, his weathered face creasing into a grin. "Federal boys don't usually make house calls for gate repairs." I let him in and explained the situation while he examined my electrical panel. Barney had this way of listening that made you feel like every word mattered. Probably learned that in the jungle. "Pacemaker interference, huh?" He scratched his gray beard. "That's specific. Most electrical systems don't put out that kind of focused signal." We spent the morning going through every component of my gate system. Barney tested frequencies, checked grounding, measured electromagnetic output. Everything came back clean. "Your system's solid, Tom. Military-grade components, proper shielding, frequency well within FCC limits." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Whatever's causing those medical problems, it ain't coming from here." That's when he noticed my neighbor's shed. Karen had built it right at the edge of her property, maybe 30 feet from where we stood. The structure looked innocent enough, but Barney was staring at it like it had personally insulted him. "That shed new?" he asked. "About a month old, same time the pacemaker problem started, according to what I heard last night." Barney set down his coffee and walked closer to the fence line. His expression changed from curious to concerned, to something that looked like recognition. "Son of a bitch," he muttered under his breath. "What is it, Barney?" He pointed toward a small black antenna poking up from behind Karen's shed. "See that little spike there? That's not for TV or internet." I squinted in the morning light. The antenna was maybe 6 inches tall, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. "What kind of antenna is it?" Barney's jaw tightened. "The kind that jams radio frequencies. High-powered, a directional. I haven't seen equipment like that since Da Nang." My stomach dropped. "Jamming equipment? That's illegal, right?" "More than illegal. That's FCC violation territory, possibly federal, depending on the power output." He turned back to me, his eyes hard. "And it would definitely mess with pacemakers in a 200-meter radius." We stood there in silence, both understanding what this meant. Karen hadn't just called the feds on me for fun. She'd created the problem first, then played victim when the solution arrived. "How long you think that thing's been running?" I asked. "Based on what you told me about the complaints, probably since the day she finished construction. Barney picked up his multimeter. Want to know for sure? 20 minutes later, we had our answer. Barney's equipment detected a strong directional jamming signal coming from Karen's shed. The frequency was specifically designed to interfere with cardiac monitoring devices. "This is targeted," Barney said, showing me the readings. "She didn't just buy this online. Someone helped her set this up." That's when Karen's back door opened. She stepped onto her deck in a pink bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking for all the world like a suburban mom enjoying her morning routine. "Morning, boys," she called out sweetly. "Working hard already?" I wanted to climb that fence and confront her right then, but Barney put a hand on my shoulder. "Some wars are won with patience," he said quietly. "Let her think she's still winning." Karen waved and went back inside, but I caught her looking toward her shed with what looked like satisfaction. That afternoon, Agent Coleman returned for the area assessment. This time, he brought a full technical team with spectrum analyzers and frequency detection equipment. I watched from my window as they set up their gear. Karen had positioned herself on her front lawn, playing the concerned citizen role to perfection. But when Coleman's team started getting readings near her shed, her performance began to crack. "Gentlemen," Coleman announced after 2 hours of testing, "we've located the source of electromagnetic interference." The federal net was closing, and Karen had no idea she was already caught. Agent Coleman's technical team had been working for 3 hours when I saw Karen's confidence start to crumble. She kept glancing toward her shed, then back at the federal agents with their sophisticated equipment. "Ma'am, we'll need access to your property for a complete assessment," Coleman told her, holding up what looked like an official warrant. "Our readings indicate the interference source is located on your land." Karen's face went pale. "That's impossible. I don't have any electronic equipment except normal household items." The lead technician, a woman named Rita, approached with a handheld device that was beeping steadily. "This is detecting a Class B jamming signal, Agent Coleman. Military specification, definitely not household equipment." I watched from my porch as Karen's whole strategy fell apart in real time. She'd played the victim so well, but now she was trapped by her own lies. "There must be some mistake," Karen stammered. "Maybe it's coming from the park, or the power lines, or—" "Ma'am," Coleman interrupted, "this equipment is precise. The signal is emanating from your shed within a 3-foot radius." That's when Karen made her first real mistake. Instead of continuing to play confused, she got defensive. "You can't just search my property without proper cause. I know my rights." Coleman raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, 5 minutes ago, you were demanding we investigate electromagnetic interference that was threatening your life. Now you're refusing to let us examine the source?" Rita had walked over to the shed and was running her scanner along the walls. The device went crazy near the back corner, where Barney and I had spotted that small antenna. "Agent Coleman," Rita called out, "I'm reading 700 watts of directed RF interference. This is broadcasting on frequencies specifically designed to disrupt cardiac monitoring equipment." 700 watts. Barney had whispered to me earlier that 50 watts would be enough to cause pacemaker problems. Karen hadn't just wanted to frame me, she'd wanted to actually hurt people. Coleman's expression had shifted from professional courtesy to something much colder. "Ma'am, we're going to need to examine that structure immediately." I don't have the key with me," Karen said weakly. "That's fine. We have tools." It took Coleman's team exactly 4 minutes to get inside Karen's shed. What they found made my blood run cold. The small building was packed with electronic equipment, radio frequency jammers, directional antennas, signal boosters, and what looked like a computer setup running monitoring software. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a sophisticated operation. "Jesus Christ," Rita muttered, photographing everything. "This setup cost at least 20 grand. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." But the most damning piece of evidence was sitting right there on Karen's workbench. A handwritten log with dates, times, and locations of pacemaker incidents. She'd been documenting her victims. Coleman emerged from the shed holding a folder full of papers. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for operating illegal jamming equipment, endangering public safety, and filing false reports to federal agencies." Karen's daughter had been watching from their front window. As the handcuffs clicked around her mother's wrists, the girl ran outside. "Mom, what's happening? You said this was about Mr. Harrison's gate." Karen looked at her daughter with tears streaming down her face. "Honey, I was trying to protect the neighborhood. His gait was dangerous and I had to prove it somehow." But her daughter wasn't buying it anymore. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson almost died when her pacemaker went crazy. And Mr. Chen from the park. You did that to them?" The weight of what Karen had done was finally hitting home. She hadn't just tried to destroy my reputation, she'd put elderly neighbors in actual danger, people with heart conditions, people who trusted their medical devices to keep them alive. As Coleman loaded Karen into the back of his SUV, she looked directly at me. "This isn't over," she said through the window. "I have friends, people who will make sure you pay for this." I thought about my grandfather then, about the wars he'd fought and the enemies he'd faced. Some battles end with surrender, others just move to a different field. Agent Coleman walked over as the SUV pulled away. "Mr. Harrison, I owe you an apology. Your system is completely legal and properly installed. Mrs. Patterson's equipment, however, was deliberately designed to cause harm." "What happens next?" I asked. "Federal charges. She's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. The medical endangerment alone will put her away for a long time." I should have felt relief, victory, justice served. But standing there in my driveway, watching Karen's daughter crying on her front steps, all I felt was tired. Sometimes winning doesn't feel like winning at all. 3 days after Karen's arrest, the real nightmare began. Her 17-year-old daughter Emma started a social media campaign that painted me as the villain who destroyed their family. The hashtag Wanj Justice for Karen spread through our small town like wildfire. Local IT consultant uses federal connections to frame innocent mother, read the post that got shared 800 times in 2 days. Emma had edited the footage from that first night, cutting out everything about the jamming equipment and focusing only on her mother being handcuffed. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with angry neighbors. The grocery store clerk wouldn't make eye contact. Mrs. Henderson from the corner house actually crossed the street to avoid walking past me. But the worst part came Thursday morning, when my biggest client, the county IT department, called with budget concerns. "Tom, we've had some complaints from residents," said Director Phillips, his voice strained. "Nothing official, but people are uncomfortable with the association. We're going to have to suspend your contract pending review." 40% of my income gone, just like that. That afternoon, Agent Coleman stopped by with paperwork for the federal case. He found me sitting on my porch, staring at Karen's empty house. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Been better," I admitted. "Turns out arresting the neighborhood villain doesn't make you the neighborhood hero." Coleman sat down on my porch steps. "You know, in 20 years of federal law enforcement, I've learned something about small towns. Truth doesn't always matter as much as the story people want to believe." "What do you mean?" "Karen wasn't just running jamming equipment. We found records going back 2 years. She's been systematically targeting anyone who threatened her control over this neighborhood. You're not her first victim, just her most recent." He handed me a thick folder. Property disputes, zoning complaints, harassment campaigns. She destroyed a young family's business 3 years ago when they tried to open a food truck. Made an elderly man sell his house and move away when he complained about her dog. I flipped through the documentation. Karen had been running a one-woman reign of terror, using bureaucracy and social manipulation to crush anyone who stood up to her. "Why didn't anyone speak up?" I asked. "Fear," Coleman said simply. "She was smart about it, always made herself look like the victim, always had just enough official backing to seem legitimate." That evening, Barney knocked on my door with a 6-pack of beer and a grim expression. "Heard about your contract," he said. "That's bullshit, Tom. Pure bullshit." We sat on my back deck, watching the sun set behind Karen's abandoned shed. The jamming equipment had been removed, but the structure remained like a monument to her deception. "You know what pisses me off most?" I said after my second beer. "Emma probably believes her mother was innocent. Karen played victim so well that even her own daughter thinks I'm the bad guy." Barney was quiet for a long moment. "My squad leader in Vietnam used to say something. The truth has a way of surfacing, but sometimes it takes a while to bubble up." "What if it doesn't? What if I'm stuck being the villain in this story?" "Then you fight back," he said, crushing his empty can. "But you fight smart, not angry." The next morning brought a knock on my door at 7 a.m. I expected another angry neighbor, or maybe process server. Instead, I found Rita, the federal technician who'd uncovered Karen's equipment. "Mr. Harrison, do you have a few minutes? There's something you need to hear." She handed me a small digital recorder. "We found this in Karen's equipment. It's a recording she made 3 days before calling us about your gate." I pressed play and heard Karen's voice, crystal clear. "The new guy's gate system is perfect for what we need. When I activate the jammer, everyone will think his equipment is causing the interference. Federal response will be immediate, and he'll be discredited permanently, just like the others." The voice on the recording wasn't the sweet suburban mom who baked cookies for school fundraisers. This was cold, calculating, predatory. "There's more," Rita said. She was planning to expand operations. Documents show she intended to target anyone who questioned the homeowner association's authority. You just happened to be convenient. I stared at the recorder. Here was proof of Karen's conspiracy, her deliberate plan to frame me. But would anyone in town believe it now? Rita seemed to read my thoughts. "Mr. Harrison, the federal case is solid. Karen's going to prison, but public opinion..." She shrugged. "That's a different battle." After she left, I sat in my kitchen holding my grandfather's dog tag and that damning recording. The truth was right there in my hands, but half the town had already decided I was guilty. Sometimes the hardest fights aren't about proving you're right. They're about proving other people are wrong. And Karen had taught this town to believe her lies for a very long time. The question was, did I have what it took to undo 2 years of carefully crafted deception? The answer came to me Sunday morning while I was drinking coffee and listening to Karen's recorded confession for the 10th time. The annual neighborhood barbecue was scheduled for next weekend in the park, the same park where Mrs. Patterson had nearly died from pacemaker interference. Every family would be there, including Emma, who was still running her social media campaign against me, including all the neighbors who'd been avoiding me since Karen's arrest, including the elderly residents who'd suffered through months of unexplained cardiac episodes. I called Barney. "I need your help with something that might backfire spectacularly." "I'm listening." "The barbecue next Saturday. What if we could demonstrate exactly what Karen's equipment was doing? Show everyone the truth instead of just telling them." Barney was quiet for a moment. "You want to recreate the jamming signal?" "Not exactly. I want to show people what 700 watts of targeted interference actually looks like, what it does to medical devices, what Karen was willing to risk to destroy her neighbors." It took us 3 days to set up the demonstration. Barney had contacts at the VA hospital who loaned us monitoring equipment and a volunteer, Jim Chen, a Korean war vet with a pacemaker who'd been one of Karen's victims. "That woman nearly killed me," Jim said when I explained the plan. "Damn right I want to show people what she did." Saturday arrived with perfect weather. The park filled with families, kids playing on swings, elderly neighbors setting up folding chairs. I watched from my back deck as Emma arrived with Karen's sister, both wearing T-shirts that said, "Free Karen Patterson." At 2 p.m., I walked across the park carrying a small portable amplifier and Rita's official recording device. Behind me, Barney wheeled a cart with the monitoring equipment. "Afternoon, everyone," I called out, my voice carrying across the gathering. "I know many of you have questions about what happened with Karen. I'd like to show you something." The crowd grew quiet, hostile, but quiet. Emma stepped forward, her phone already recording. "We don't want to hear your lies," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You destroyed my family." "Emma, I understand why you're angry. Your mother lied to you too." I held up the recorder. "This is Karen's voice, recorded 3 days before she called the federal agents on me. I want everyone to hear what she really planned." I pressed play. Karen's voice filled the park, cold and calculating as she described her plan to frame me using the jamming equipment. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some people looked skeptical, others shocked, but Emma wasn't backing down. "That could be anyone. You probably faked that recording." "You're right to be suspicious," I said. "So let me show you something that can't be faked." I nodded to Barney, who activated a low-power version of Karen's jamming signal, just enough to demonstrate the effect without causing actual harm. Jim Chen was wearing a portable heart monitor connected to our display screen. The moment Barney activated the signal, Jim's readings went haywire. Numbers spiked, alarms beeped, and the elderly man grabbed his chest in genuine distress. "Turn it off!" Mrs. Henderson gasped from the crowd. "You're hurting him." Barney immediately shut down the signal. Jim's readings returned to normal, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen what Karen's equipment could do to a human being. That demonstration used 50 watts, I announced. Karen's equipment was running at 700 watts, 24 hours a day for over a month. Aimed directly at this park where your children play and your grandparents walk their dogs. The crowd had gone dead silent. Emma was staring at the monitor display, her face pale. Jim Chen nearly died walking past Karen's house 3 weeks ago, I continued. Mrs. Patterson collapsed right here in this park. 5 other neighbors had cardiac episodes. Not because of my gait, because Karen Patterson was running military-grade jamming equipment designed to make you think I was the threat. I pulled out the folder Coleman had given me. She's done this before. The Martinez family who wanted to start a food truck. Karen filed 14 false complaints until they went bankrupt. Harold Webb, who tried to run for the homeowner association board. Karen spread rumors about him being a pedophile until he moved away. People in the crowd started murmuring. I saw recognition in their eyes as they remembered the Martinez family, remembered Harold's sudden departure. She made you afraid of each other, I said. Made you suspicious, made you look for enemies in your own neighborhood, because as long as you were fighting each other, nobody questioned her. Emma had stopped recording. Her phone hung loose in her hand as she stared at me with growing horror. She documented everything, I said gently, looking directly at Emma. Your mother kept logs of every person she hurt. Every family she destroyed. The federal agents have all of it. No, Emma whispered. She was protecting the neighborhood. She was protecting us. From what, Emma? From me putting up a legal gate? From the Martinez family selling tacos? From Harold Webb wanting to fix the potholes on Maple Street? The truth was settling over the crowd like a heavy blanket. 2 years of Karen's lies, unraveling in real time. But I wasn't finished yet. The most important part was still coming. Here's what Karen didn't count on, I said, pulling out my grandfather's dog tag one last time. She thought fear would keep everyone silent, but sometimes someone has to stand up and say, enough. The crowd was watching me now, really watching, maybe for the first time since I'd moved to their neighborhood. Some wars are won with patience, I said, echoing Barney's words, and some are won by refusing to stay silent. The silence stretched across the park like morning fog. Then Jim Chen stepped forward, his weathered hands still shaking slightly from the demonstration. I want to say something, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned the right to speak. I served in Korea, lost friends to enemy fire, but I never thought I'd be attacked in my own neighborhood by someone I trusted. He turned to face the crowd. Karen Patterson nearly killed me, not by accident, not by mistake, on purpose. And she would have let this man take the blame. Mrs. Henderson was the next to speak up. The Martinez family, I felt terrible when they left town. They were good people. She looked at me with something that might have been shame. I believed Karen's stories about permits and health violations. One by one, neighbors began sharing their own experiences. How Karen had spread rumors, filed complaints, turned people against each other. The pattern became clear. Anyone who challenged her control became a target. But it was Emma's reaction that broke my heart. The 17-year-old girl stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she processed the truth about her mother. She told me you were dangerous, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. She said men like you destroyed families. That's why she had to protect everyone. I walked over to her slowly, the way you approach a wounded animal. Emma, your mother isn't a monster. She's a person who made terrible choices, but that doesn't make you responsible for her actions. Everyone's going to hate us, she sobbed. I have to finish senior year here. I have to live in that house where she built that thing. The crowd was watching this exchange with uncomfortable fascination. This was the moment that would define what kind of community we really were. No, said Mrs. Henderson firmly. Emma, you're not your mother. This community failed you by not speaking up sooner. We won't fail you again. Barney had been quietly packing up the demonstration equipment, but now he stopped and looked at Emma. Kid, you remind me of my daughter at your age. Strong-willed, loyal to a fault. Those aren't bad qualities. You just had them pointed in the wrong direction. Other neighbors started stepping forward. Offers to help with groceries, rides to school, emotional support. It was like watching a neighborhood remember how to be neighborly. But the real victory came when Agent Coleman arrived with an update on Karen's case. Mrs. Patterson took a plea deal this morning, he announced to the gathered crowd. 5 years federal prison, full restitution to victims, and cooperation in identifying other communities where similar operations might be running. Other communities? I asked. This wasn't her first neighborhood, Mr. Harrison. We're finding evidence of similar patterns in 3 other towns over the past decade. Karen Patterson was running a very sophisticated operation. Emma looked like she was going to be sick. How many people did she hurt? Coleman's expression softened. More than we know. But because of what happened here, because your neighbor refused to stay quiet, we're going to find them all. As the crowd began to disperse, I found myself standing alone with Barney and Emma. The girl looked lost, like someone who'd discovered their whole world was built on lies. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. I thought about my grandfather's dog tag, about the wars he'd fought and the peace he'd found afterward. "You do what everyone else does after their world falls apart," I said. "You build a better one." 3 months later, I was sitting on my porch when my gate chimed. Emma walked up my driveway carrying a folder and wearing her graduation cap and gown. "I got into state," she said. "Full scholarship, engineering program." "That's fantastic, Emma. Your mother would be proud." She shook her head. "No, she wouldn't. She'd find some way to tear it down, make me doubt myself. I'm done living for her approval." She handed me the folder. Inside were architectural plans for converting Karen's shed into a community garden workspace. "I want to turn her weapon into something that helps people," Emma said, "but I need an electrical consultant to make sure everything's safe." I looked at the plans, then at this remarkable young woman who'd found strength in the ruins of her family's reputation. "I'd be honored to help," I said. "Have you ever wondered how some people find the courage to rebuild after everything falls apart? Sometimes it takes a whole community to hold someone up while they figure out how to stand again. My gate still works perfectly. The federal case established that my system never caused any interference. My county contract was restored with a formal apology. But the real victory isn't in my vindication, it's in watching Emma graduate, seeing neighbors actually talk to each other instead of whispering behind closed doors, knowing that Karen's reign of fear is truly over. My grandfather's dog tag sits on my kitchen table now, no longer hidden in my pocket. Some wars end with surrender, others end with communities remembering how to trust each other again. The shed where Karen built her weapon of fear now grows tomatoes and sunflowers. Emma tends it every summer when she comes home from college. Sometimes the best revenge is growing something beautiful in the ashes of someone else's hate. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, and remember, truth has a way of surfacing, but sometimes it needs someone brave enough to help it bubble up. The war for our neighborhood is over, but the peace we built in its place, that's something worth fighting for.